This is the County Fair. I'm Kurt Radel, Waycross Community Media. Today, our special guest is Hamilton County Board of Elections Director, Sherry Poland. Sherry, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's needless to say, busy time for you.
It is definitely our busy time of the year.
Well, let's get an overview of the election administration and what you do.
Sure. Well, every county in Ohio has a board of elections. Our board is governed by a 4-person board member. 2 are affiliated with the local Democratic Party and 2 are affiliated with the local Republican Party. The board then appoints a director and a deputy director of opposite political parties and a full-time staff. You may have noticed the theme. It's a bipartisan theme. That's how boards of elections are structured in Ohio. It's Democrats and Republicans working together with a common mission, and that's to administer a free and fair election.
Now, voter registration, let's talk about the methods, requirements, and deadlines.
Absolutely. It's easy to register to vote in Ohio. Voters can choose to register online by going to the Secretary of State's website. When registering online, voters must have an Ohio driver's license or an Ohio state identification card number, plus their social security number to register online. When registering on a paper form, only one form of ID is needed. Again, either Ohio driver's license or Ohio state ID or the last 4 digits of their social security number. And voters can find those paper forms at their public library, at the Board of Elections. They can register to vote at their local BMV. Any questions, we always encourage folks to either log on to our website, votehamiltoncountyohio.gov, or give us a call at the Board of Elections.
I've been on the website a number of times, very easy to negotiate and to navigate through what's going on there. Now let's talk about early voting, absenteeism. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, absentee voting begins on October 8th. So the deadline to register to vote is October 7th, and then voting begins the very next day, October 8th. In Ohio, voters have 3 ways to choose to cast their ballot, one of which is voting by mail, commonly also referred to as absentee voting. So in order to vote by mail, voters do need to complete an application and mail it into the board. In Ohio, boards do not automatically mail ballots to voters, so they do have to fill out that application. And the Ohio Secretary of State just recently mailed an application to every registered voter in the state of Ohio. I know I just received mine.
I just received mine yesterday, yes.
Good, great. I know that's a pretty large mailing. There's over 8 million voters in Ohio. So voters who wish to vote by mail simply complete that form. They can mail it back to the Board of Elections or deliver it in person or use our convenient 24-hour drop box. It is a drive-up drop box voters can utilize that's at the Board of Elections facility in Norwood. Once the voter completes the application, sends it to the Board of Election, the board will process the application, and then we begin mailing ballots on October 8th.
Now, on Election Day, which is November 5th, what are the voting hours? Because they're consistent throughout the entire state, correct?
That is correct. On Election Day, November 5th, polls are open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m.
If you're looking for your particular precinct as to where to go, maybe you're going to a school, some other facility, where might they find that?
Yes, well, the easiest way, again, would be to go onto our website. We have an easy tool that says, where do I vote? Click the button, you'll put in your address, and then your polling location with a map and driving directions will appear on the screen. I also want to note that at the beginning of October, the Board of Elections will be mailing a postcard notice to every voter, informing them of their assigned polling place, the hours the polls will be open, and also the forms of ID that are required to vote in person.
And you were talking about voting in person. What kind of a process is involved there?
Yes. So whether you're voting early in person at the Board of Elections during the early voting period, or if you're voting at your polling place on Election Day, you must present an acceptable form of ID. And there's been a recent change in Ohio law that has changed the ID that is acceptable for voting purposes. So every voter that votes in person must present an Ohio driver's license or an Ohio state identification card, a passport, or a U.S. issued military ID or veterans identification card. And those have to be physical IDs. The only exception to that is the U.S. Veterans Card, because that only is issued in electronic form. So that's the only electronic form of ID we can accept. I want to note that specifically because Ohio recently started issuing driver's license and state identification cards by mobile, by your app that you can display on your phone. We can't accept that for voting purposes. It has to be a physical photo ID.
Is the reason for that is because an app can be hacked?
It could be, in my job, it's just to simply follow and enforce the election laws. And the election law regarding ID in the state of Ohio states that it must be a physical ID, photo ID that is shown, with the one exception of the veteran ID card.
If someone is viewing this program at this moment and they go, I don't have a driver's license, I don't have that other ID that you're talking about, how can they get that particular ID?
Yes, very simple. Go to your local Bureau of Motor Vehicles and they will issue you a free state identification card.
Very good, because there are some senior citizens who are no longer driving. I know my brother, for example, he and his wife no longer drive, so hopefully they have a card, but they're in Texas.
Okay.
So they may
yes.
do things a little differently
They may
in
do
the
things.
Lone Star State. You never know.
They may.
Now, it used to be, going to the voting booth was a simple process. Then it got to be a little bit more difficult. Some people rush through it. When somebody's going to that voter booth, what do you recommend that they go through? I'm sure they should be reading everything. What do you suggest?
I actually recommend that they come up with a plan to vote and be prepared before they walk into the voting booth. So doing the things that we've talked about, making sure they're aware of their assigned polling location, making sure they have the proper identification. They can also view a sample ballot. So they can go onto our website, again, put in their address, and they can actually see their sample ballot for their particular precinct so that they can research the candidates and issues that will appear on their ballot when they go to cast their vote, whether it's election day or early in person. If the voter does not have access to the website, to the internet, they can give us a call at the Board of Elections and we will mail them a sample ballot. So I encourage people to have a plan, decide if you're going to vote by mail, early in person, or at your polling place on election day. Be prepared, know what's going to be on your ballot so you can make an informed decision when you go into the polling place.
Sherry, you talked about having a plan, which is a great idea. Are you allowed to take any information with you into that booth?
You can take what we refer to as your personal papers with you. Now, there's no campaigning allowed inside the polling place or within 100 feet of the entrance to the polling place. So you can't walk in with your campaign literature and raise it in the air and say, vote for so-and-so. That's not permitted. But you can bring your literature with you, hold it in your possession, use it to follow as a guide if you'd like. That's fine.
Now, when it comes to election night, which is an exciting time, I've covered it many times, is that the official count or the unofficial count on election night?
It is the unofficial count. The official count occurs somewhere between 5 and 21 days after Election Day.
And what is the reason for that?
Yes. So election night is the unofficial count. There are still ballots that may be eligible to be counted after election night. So I'll go into that a little bit and what those categories are. So those absentee ballots by mail we've been talking about, if those are received at the Board of Elections by 7:30 p.m. on election day, they are counted election night. However, if they are received after election day, as long as it was postmarked the day before election day and received at the board within 4 days after election day, that would be the Saturday after election day, those ballots can be counted and added to the official count. There's also something that we call provisional ballots. It's not really a special kind of ballot. It's the same ballot that any other voter would get. But a provisional voter is one where their eligibility to vote may, for whatever reason, be in question when they appear to cast their ballot. So their ballot is not counted on election day. They're issued a ballot, they mark the ballot, they place it inside a provisional envelope, and they fill out an affirmation that's on the envelope. It's very simple. They just provide some identifying information, their name, their address, form of ID, date of birth, and signature. So after Election Day, we compare the information on that envelope to our voter registration database. And as long as everything is accurate and the person has not already cast a ballot in the election, then that provisional ballot is also added to the official count. I'd like to give a few examples of why someone
right
might
ahead.
be
Yes.
required to vote
I was going to ask you that, so
Yeah.
you're beating me to the punch.
You know, sometimes folks kind of refer to provisional voting as like a dirty word, like it's a bad thing.
You're getting
to
into
vote.
my personal life, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that, but it's actually a safety net. It is. It's a safety net. So for a voter that may be registered to vote, but for whatever reason the poll worker cannot locate them in the electronic poll book, it allows the voter that second chance of casting their ballot, and then it's counted later rather than simply being turned away at the polling place. No voter should ever be turned away at the polling place. I think the most common reason why people are required to vote provisionally is that they have moved and did not update their new address with the Board of Elections. So it's important to do that by that voter registration deadline of October 7th. But if you don't, it's okay. You can still vote provisionally by just appearing at your new polling location. Another reason why voters are asked to vote provisionally or required to vote provisionally is they may have requested an absentee ballot by mail. So once you do that, your record is flagged because that means we've already issued you a ballot. So we need to make sure that that absentee ballot by mail was not returned and counted before we count your provisional.
At what point you take the absentee ballot? Is that done on election day or before election day?
It's done before election day. Now, there's no counting until the polls close, but we do what we refer to as acts of preparation. So when an absentee ballot by mail is returned to the Board of Elections, it must be returned inside of an identification envelope that the board sends to you in your packet with your ballot. Again, you're just supplying identifying information, your name, your address, a form of ID, your signature. That information on that absentee vote by mail envelope is compared to our voter registration database. As long as everything matches, then that ballot is removed from the envelope and scanned. That does occur prior to election day, but it is not tabulated. In fact, the software we use to scan the ballot and cast or record that cast vote record is not capable of tabulating. So during the 28 days while early voting is going on and voting by mail, that's what our bipartisan teams are doing. They're verifying that the ballot can be counted, they're scanning the ballot and securely storing the ballot. Then at 7:31 p.m. when the polls close on election night, those absentee ballots voted by mail or early in person are the first ballots that are counted on election night. Because they're in our possession, we've already scanned them.
Help me out on the fact that sometimes you hear on television, on election coverage that night, a certain precinct has been slow in getting the tabulation. What's involved there when they're saying a precinct is slow? Why would that happen?
Sure. Well, I want to point out that the voting equipment that's used in Ohio is not connected to the internet. In fact, it does not have the hardware inside of the equipment that would allow it to connect to
And
the
is that
internet.
for the purpose of, so there's no interference,
Absolutely.
no hacking or anything else?
Absolutely.
Yes.
That is for security reasons. But with that being said, that means that the scanners that record the cast vote record, as well as the physical paper ballots in Hamilton County, have to be hand delivered to the Board of Elections. So we do not transmit vote tallies over the internet. So bipartisan poll workers deliver the scanners and the ballots to the Board of Elections. And there's, a lot of other security measures that go along with it. There are chain of custody forms that have to be signed off on. All of the ballots are secured in ballot bags that have a recorded serial number. The equipment is sealed with a recorded serial number that has to be verified before we can then open up the scanner, retrieve the thumb drive, and then plug that into our vote counting room on election night. So there's a lot of steps involved in getting those those results to the Board of Elections safely in order for us to be able to tabulate and then release those results out on the website.
Now, when you have a particular race, whether it's for candidates or an issue, and it becomes very close percentage-wise, what is the percentage of where it's an automatic recount?
Yes, well, automatic recounts are declared after we have an official count. As we've just been discussing, the election night count is an unofficial count. And I will tell you, it never fails. If we have a race that is close on election night, we'll receive a number of calls the next day, when's the recount? Well, first we have to have that official count because we have those outstanding provisionals and absentees that can be added. So once the official count is conducted, if the margin of victory is less than 0.5%, an automatic recount is declared. Now, it's a little less than that if it's a statewide contest. It's a 0.25%, and that would be the Secretary of State that has to declare that recount. So what's involved with a recount? We hand count 5% of the ballots cast in that contest, rescan those ballots, and there has to be a match. The hand count must match the electronic count. If it does not match, then we continue to count another 5%. We add on another 5% of the hand count. I've been doing this for 20 years, a little knock on wood. I can tell you that we've never had a mismatch after counting that 5%. If we do have a mismatch, it's always in the hand count, because it's humans hand counting a ballot. So we'll count again, have a different team count again. If there's a match, then the remaining 95% of the ballots cast in that contest are then rescanned. And then we have a new official recount.
Are there ever anything what is called audits?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Ohio law requires all Board of Elections to audit each election. And that occurs, if there's no recounts, the audit occurs after the recount. If there is a recount, if there's not a recount, it occurs immediately after the official count. That also involves hand counting a percentage of the votes and the ballots cast in the election. Again, this is hand counting the paper ballots. And we use something that's called a risk limiting audit. It's pretty standard nationwide. And what that means is the closer the race, the more ballots we hand count. So that in order to statistically prove that the results are accurate. And it's pretty cool. It's to watch because it's very transparent. It's very random. So prior to election day, the board's election officials do not know which contests in the election we are going to have to audit. The Secretary of State directs us on those contests after election night. It's almost always the top of the ticket. We've always had to audit the race for president as well as the race for governor in gubernatorial years. And then the Secretary of State will order us to audit 2 additional contests. Sometimes he instructs us on the contest. Sometimes he instructs us to do a random draw. When that happens, we do that in a public meeting before the board. We try to be as transparent as possible, literally take each contest, put them on a slip of paper inside a plastic clear container, shake it up, pull them out of the hat. And then we randomly draw which ballots will actually be hand counted. And that's done by a roll of the dice. And we do that, again, all in public view. The media is welcome to come. Members of the public are welcome to come. We notice when we have the audit.
You talked about having the recount, and we were talking about candidates. But in Hamilton County, as in most counties in Ohio, there are a lot of individual townships, cities, school levies on. Is that a different ballgame of what you have to do, or is that the same path that you go through?
It's the same path that we go through. Those contests are also subject to be audited.
Sounds good to me. If you would, for those just joining us, let's go over those key dates.
Yes, absolutely. The deadline to register to vote or to update your registration if you've had a change of name or change of address is October 7th. The Board of Elections begins mailing ballots on October 8th, and that's also the start of early in-person voting. And then, of course, we have Election Day, November 5th, where polls will be open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m.
And if you're looking for your precinct, you can go on your website. Tell us where your website is.
Absolutely. Vote hamiltoncounty.ohio.gov or give us a call at the Board of Elections, 513-632-7000.
One other question. A couple gets married and she had her maiden name. Now she takes on my name. Does she need to check to make sure it's now Tammy Radel and not Tammy Jones?
Yes, she should. And she can check that by going onto our website or again by giving us a call. Again, there's still plenty of time for her to update that change of name by filling out a registration update form and submitting it on October 7th. But if she doesn't, she can still cast her ballot. Now, in order to cast a regular ballot, meaning not vote provisionally, she would have to bring a legal document that has both her former and her current name. But if not, again, she can still vote provisionally, and then it'll be counted after Election Day.
Sounds good to me. Well, I thank you for coming here and enlightening us. Now, Waycross will have our election forums once again this fall in October. We'll be talking about having the local candidates, local issues, so that people can become more informed. But I thank you for 20 years of service.
Thank you. I appreciate
No,
that.
that's great. I really do appreciate that tremendously.
Yeah.
And thank you for working with Waycross. I know you've been a friend of Waycross for a long time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This has been the County Fair, featuring the Hamilton County Board of Elections Director, Sherry Poland. I'm Kurt Radel of Waycross Community Media. We'll see you next time.